All right, well, we are going to go ahead and get started. Again, tonight's Caregiver 411, and our host, our guest tonight is the amazing Georgia Mueller, and want to thank her for being a part of this. And with that, I'll just turn over to Georgia and let her take it away. And thank you for coming out.
Great. Thank you for having me always. Love to hang out with you SOAR folks anytime I get the opportunity. So tonight we want to talk about some transition-ish kind of issues, but I really wasn't sure who was going to get on it. And I'm really glad that I picked what I did because it's not quite as age confining as our traditional concept of transition. So this is really more about the sort of what I call the scaffolding of the systems, because what a lot of people don't understand is where the different funding is coming from that they may be using or asking for, and then how does that relate to other funding? How does it relate to your likelihood of accessing that funding and using it? How can you use it? Stuff like that. So I want to share this tool that I've developed after like years and years of doing this work. It's very as a systems navigator, it's kind of difficult to have the same conversation with thousands of people over and over again. So eventually, I just started developing some tools to make life easier. So I'm going to do a quick screen share with you guys and show you what I'm talking about. And these are tools too that I'm more than happy to send out to send to Doc after the talk, and then he can share them as people are interested. In fact, I only really want to look at one side at a time. Oh, that did not do what I wanted to do. All right, whoops, that still didn't do it. Sorry about that. Maybe I should just go back to where I started. And now I'm having a hard time figuring out where that is. Okay, view, here we go.
The view,
One page. Yeah. Thank you. Woo. All right. So first of all, just for a little context, so that I make sure that I am hitting the audience as needed, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask two of our participants that I happen to already know if you can tell us a little bit about your individual's age and the kinds of services that you may have already accessed in the past, just a couple sentences, and I will lead by example. So Caleb is my son. He's 25 years old. He has autism level 2 to 3, depending on what you asked him to do. Of course, if it's a preferred activity, he's a 2, right? And he does have a lot of challenges with language. And so we have used pretty much every system I have listed on this sheet, except for maybe children, youth with special healthcare needs is one that I've not, he's never qualified for that. But other than that, pretty much everything. So Julie, I recognize you. Could you share a sort of a parallel comment there about either of your kiddos or both, however you'd like?
I can start with my son, who is not in the system, although as you know, we don't know, that's not going to change soon. So for him, I haven't really used anything that I think is in your scaffolding other than just learning for future. But for my daughter, who has spina bifida, she's on SSI. She has a waiver. It used to be the help waiver. Now is it the community waiver?
Community support waiver? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, her amazing caseworker just kind of made that happen when she saw the hope waiver wasn't meeting her needs. And then one day it was like, upgrade. If you have a great caseworker, then magic things happen. Let's see, she's been through voc rehab. She's got Medicaid, obviously because of the waiver. Ticket to work. She obviously, yeah, she does have that. She's part-time working at our local school district. Voc rehab paid for her to go to college. As I mentioned to Georgia, back when we talked, it took her 8 years to get her 4-year degree. They allowed her to go part-time because that's what fit her schedule. Normally they went full-time, but they allowed her to go part-time because that's what her body would allow. So yeah, that's been amazing. She's got an ABLE account, and Platte County Board of Services is where we are. So that's our SB 40. We do have a special needs trust. It's been made a long time ago, so I definitely need to have that updated. Looking through the list, I think that covers the main things, but there are just so many little side things sometimes that pop up, but that looks like that's where I'm looking at the list and I'm recognizing we're thinking about oh, I don't see SNAP on there. We're thinking about getting our SNAP as soon as things kind of round and are needed. So yeah, I think that covers it. And then, other things that I can't think of.
It's okay. Great. All right. And so, I'm sorry, how old did you say your son is again?
I'm sorry. My daughter's 34. My son is 28.
Gotcha. Right. So they're in their late 20s,
Yeah.
early 30s. Yep. So to understand the scaffolding of systems of services, a lot of times families will come to me and they will share, oh, we're using Ability KC. I'm like, great. And they know that they're getting therapy, or they're getting early childhood, or they're getting driving lessons if they're individuals of the age that they can drive. They may be getting rehabilitative services. They may be getting employment services, but they don't know what Ability KC is. And so while they're excited about this organization and they think they're getting so much from it, and they are, that's a lot. That's one of the biggest agencies in Kansas City. They're not necessarily understanding how to maximize that opportunity because they don't know where that opportunity happens to lie within this overall structure. And so it's important when I talk with those families and begin to serve them that I can teach them kind of, well, where are you already in this structure? Where are you already living? So just for clarification, Ability KC, very, very large therapy company that has services from birth to death. In this case, though, they're only really located in the local grassroots segment of coverage and what they do. And the interesting thing is, now that I know where Ability KC lies within that local grassroots region, I can also help to share with that family, by the way, did they know that county boards of services will oftentimes pay for the fees for a child with a disability to attend their early childhood center? Did they know that if their individual wanted to take the driving classes, they very well could work with vocational rehabilitation to get those driving classes paid for? And that, so that you're pulling in different organizations from different levels of the scaffolding, and they're all helping you work towards those goals. But if you didn't understand that Ability KC is located inside of this category, being local grassroots, you may not understand that there are opportunities to connect them with entities in other categories and seek additional help and seek ways to get those services paid for. Another example I can tie back to, tie school districts, which I didn't even list school districts here. That's ridiculous, but well, yes, I did. There are local grassroots school districts in the state. So Missouri Parents Act, which is where I worked before, they are there to support families regarding access to their services in schools. So Missouri Parents Act is a statewide organization. It covers the entire state of Missouri. And again, they can help people to access the services inside of their public school districts. Public school districts can also, again, local grassroots, people know what their school districts are. They kind of know what their school districts do, but maybe they don't understand that your school district can also bill Medicaid on behalf of your individual for some of the treatments and therapy and support they're receiving under their IEP. A lot of people do not know that. What else? Let's see, the school district can get nursing in the district on behalf of a high medical need student. and that can be paid for with Medicaid, or the school district can pay for it themselves. But a lot of times they can totally bill Medicaid and they don't know it. So I love to be able to teach a school district how to get more cash flow into their bucket, how to make that work. Let's see here. Social Security Administration is connected to Ticket to Work health assurance, by example. So a lot of people don't understand that Social Security Administration is a lot of what makes Medicaid available to those individuals when there is a disability involved, because the Social Security determination of disability is what makes that version of Medicaid available. So when I talk about that version of Medicaid, I'm talking about Mo Health Net for aged, blind, and disabled, which you have to have a medical eligibility code of 13 to access that. And when you have that, and then you go to work, then you can switch to a different medical eligibility code, use the same Medicaid, and it's Ticket to Work health insurance at that juncture. But the insurance is exactly the same, but the reason you were able to use it changes. So there's different, every single entity here interacts with other entities on different levels, just depending on what they're responsible for. Again, the bigger organizations are responsible for more. Of course, they're responsible for more funding. They're responsible for more comprehensive coverage of really helping everybody that could possibly fit into those categories. So are there any entities on this list that anybody who is on today is not familiar with and would like a little bit of an explanation about? And Doc, you're allowed to ask questions too.
I don't understand the Ticket to Work health assurance.
Yes. Ticket to Work health assurance is phenomenal. So when somebody has SSDI because they've worked, or, well, I shouldn't say it that way, for any reason. If somebody needs Medicaid, but they're also going to work for real, they can still access that Medicaid like they were able to before. But the fact that they want to work and they're pursuing work gives them the opportunity to continue to hold on to that benefit. Ticket to Work health assurance is a work incentive benefit, and it can be accessed by paying a small premium. And it's so cool because there are people who, say, for example, your individual that you support uses a power wheelchair that costs as much as a new car. For real, that's what they cost. It's crazy. But say they do, and they want to take a job. They're afraid to take a job because, well, what happens if their wheelchair goes out and they need a new wheelchair and they don't have Medicaid anymore? Private insurance doesn't pay for wheelchairs like that. The only place that pays for wheelchairs and stuff like that that's that expensive is Medicaid. And so the cool thing about Ticket to Work health insurance is you literally can earn up to about $48,000 in a year and not lose that Medicaid. And the fact that you still need the Medicaid to maybe pay for prescription medication, which I've heard of some prescription medication for migraines running about $10,000 a year. I'm sorry, excuse me, $10,000 a month in one case of a friend of mine, $10,000 a month. Completely cost prohibitive for her work if she cannot use Ticket to Work health insurance. And then the wheelchair example is another great example. But with these things, you can work, you can go past your substantial gainful activity, and you're somewhat protected from medical redeterminations. And you can earn a very substantial living, but you are just buying back into that Medicaid to keep it live so you can keep using it. but you have to get to it through the ticket, through the whole ticket to work system, which is a whole nother webinar. So wasn't really planning to go quite that deep tonight.
So do you have to apply for that before getting off Medicaid, or how does that part work?
Yeah, so at that juncture, usually what happens is you've been working with Medicaid and Social Security already. Mostly you've been working with Social Security at that point, using work incentive benefits, and hopefully you can kind of see it coming, and you can give them a heads up and say, hey, you know what? I got to this point now where I know I'm going to either have to, give up some of my pay benefits, but I really can't give up that Medicaid. And so they need to notify them before taking that pay raise, before really jumping in the deep end. They would be having a intense conversation with their Social Security representative to make sure that nothing gets missed. It's not something, I mean, you can stumble into it by accident, but I don't recommend it. I really recommend that you plan anything as intense as dropping a benefit and gaining another one. You plan that in advance. Yeah.
And then does that program vary state to state, or being federal, is it pretty much the same across the board, all states?
That's what's cool, is it really is the same.
Awesome.
There may be some slight dollar differences on how much you can have in your assets and things like that. Like I know Missouri just changed our asset boundaries and they're really nice. And then I went and looked at other states and some are not as great, and vice versa. But as far as just how they work in general, they're pretty close state to state. Yeah. Now what happens too though is every state does this, and it just drives me crazy. They give all their programs these cute little names, and so then if you're trying to study it from one state to another, it doesn't always translate. I can't always be sure what I'm looking at in one state versus another until I go look it up and compare notes. But they do look the same once you look at the skeletons. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I have just one more quick question on this, Georgia.
Uh-huh.
What is the time period as far as applying and being approved for this one? Is it, hopefully it's not like the waiver and everything else?
Oh, not at all. No, it's more of a flip of a button. So
Okay.
yeah, it's more like, hey, I'm using this. I know I qualify for this now. Can you go ahead and move me over? And they're like, yep, we got the proof. We're good. Here you go. Click. Done. So it's definitely not like a waiver where there's only a certain number of slots and you have to like compete for them practically or anything like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. What else? Anybody else have other questions about what's on this list? Okay. I'll let that marinate in case anything else pops up. We can come back to it. So I wanted to talk a little bit also just about filling out applications for benefits and things like that, because there are some consistent sort of rules about these applications. And then I'll tell you a story about something I learned today that's really cool. But first of all, in filling out applications, do you always do SSI or SSDI first? Well, actually, I need to update that because mostly you do want to do SSI or SSDI first. And let me tell you the difference between the two of those, first of all, because I don't want to get too far down the line here. So SSI is Social Security income. I'm sorry, supplemental security income. SSDI is Social Security disability insurance. With SSI, any citizen or any lawful person in our country is eligible to receive SSI if they fit the disability and income and asset criteria. And then SSDI is based on the person having worked. So either the individual has worked or their parent has had a work record, or their parent is retired or deceased or disabled as well. So whenever the parent becomes disabled, deceased, or retired, then the their child can take advantage of SSDI payments as long as they had a disability that was determined to be a disability by Social Security Administration criteria before the age of 22. If you wait much past that and don't really have good evidence, they don't really like to look backwards. If you do have a lot of evidence and you go to them after 22, they will go ahead and try to shore that up. But it's not a guarantee. It's harder to make that happen. So the reason I say to apply for Social Security first is probably because I come from the invisible disability world. So with autism and even with mental health stuff and things like that, the Social Security Administration is better at making disability determinations for invisible disabilities than Medicaid is. Medicaid is great if you have a lot of medical stuff going on and a strong medical history that's like within the last 2 or 3 years, or a lifelong medical diagnosis of some kind, like Down syndrome, spina bifida, something like that, CP, etc. It's going to be a lot easier to get through the Medicaid application with that high quantity of medical background. But if you've got autism and bipolar disorder, you're going to have a really hard time getting an approval out of Medicaid first. You want to do SSI first in that case. And then what happens is whichever one you got the disability determination under, you take that information and you go to the other entity to finish up the rest of it. So if you get the SSI eligibility to go through, then you can take that determination and you take it to Medicaid, and the Medicaid will kick in like immediately because the disability determination has already been determined. Any questions about that?
Do I have this right, Georgia? You say go to SSI first, and then if we have if we have a family member that's retired, go to that one next. Is that incorrect?
So, close.
I have this correct or wrong?
The first one is you're going to go to SSI before Medicaid, right? Now, SSI versus SSDI, the ironic thing is the applicant is not actually who decides which one you're applying for. You simply do the Social Security application, and then the evidence that comes through in that application helps the Social Security Administration figure out which program is a match for your situation, which criteria do you qualify for. And at that point, they send you down the right chute, whether it be SSI or SSDI.
Okay, thank you.
And SSI first, again, if you've got like low medical but high invisible disability. All right, any other questions about that? Okay. Appealing, when you get denied, always appeal, no matter what, always appeal. And a lot of times when you first get that denial letter, it's going to say something at the back on the bottom in mice type, of course, like you have X number of days to appeal this decision, and you may connect with free legal representation through legal aid or through Missouri Protection and Advocacy. Fine, you can do that, or you can just go ahead and file a really basic appeals letter to begin with, which will be sort of a holding place type of thing. And then you go find an attorney who is willing and able to take your case, and they will help you to flesh out that entire process so that your appeal is as effective as possible. You don't want to try to, the writing of the letter to say I'm appealing is not the appeal itself. So you don't want to spend hours writing that appeal letter. All you have to say is I disagree and I'm appealing, and you sign it, and that's it. You're not required to write any more than that in the appeal. You can write more if you want to, but you don't have to. And then the lawyer, again, will help you flesh that out. So if you have to appeal an SSI application and get an attorney, what they're going to do is they're going to look at when you first applied, and then they're going to figure out whether or not they think they can win your case for you. And if they believe they can, now they're going to try to find out, is there going to be enough money in that back pay bucket, which I'll explain that in a second. If there's going to be enough money in the back pay bucket to make it worth them taking the job, then they will take it. So the minute you apply to begin with starts the beginning of your back pay bucket. And actually, it really starts on the first of the following month. So the first you could get paid for would be the first day of the month after you do your application. So if you apply sometime in the middle of September, your first payment date would be October 1st. Theoretically, it's never going to happen that fast, of course. But what will happen is they're going to say, well, we're going to pay you all the way back to December or to October 1st. And so, so when you do the appeal, the attorney needs to see that like there's not, the ball hasn't been dropped along the way. So they're looking all the way back to when you first applied, and maybe your appeal, maybe you didn't get the paperwork to do an appeal for 6 months, which sounds crazy, but Social Security is extremely backlogged right now. So nothing surprises me anymore. But if you've got 6 months worth of money sitting in your back pay bucket, you got enough money to pay your attorney. And if they think they can win your case, they're going to be happy to take it. So that makes a big difference. But never hesitate to appeal, and don't think that you have to be an appeal wizard to do so. Just go ahead and file it. All right. Any questions on that process? Okay. So Medicaid will use your SSI or SSDI determination to streamline the application process. So you're going to find the Medicaid application by Googling your state and say apply for Medicaid. And you look up the application, you start filling it out. And I know for sure, Julie, you've done a Medicaid application before. Anybody else here done a Medicaid application before?
No.
Nope. Rael, how about you? Hi.
Hello, I think yeah, we did.
You did one? Okay.
Yeah.
So if anybody's done a Medicaid application, you would know that the questions are really weird and they feel kind of arbitrary, and they don't always seem like they match your situation, because Medicaid and Social Security applications are written for literally anybody on earth who could need to fill them out. So that means it can be people filling them out on behalf of children, people filling them out on behalf of adults who became disabled in the middle of their life. It could be on behalf of somebody who's about to turn 18 or just did turn 18. Which, by the way, don't file until your kiddo's 18. I'll explain that in a minute here. But the applications, somebody said once to me, oh yeah, I think the people who write that application went to like Nazi application writing school or something, because the questions are mean feeling and extremely cold, and they're very direct, and it just feels like a rude invasion of your privacy. And every time I fill out a government application, I feel the same way. So trust me, you're not alone in feeling that way. It's sadly, it's their norm. But that's just sort of how they do it. I mentioned, what was I saying? Oh yeah, on Social Security and Medicaid, if you are waiting to apply for those things in part due to not to them to you exceeding their income guidelines, and we don't want them to count your income if it doesn't count and stuff, you actually have to wait until the first day after the date of their birth date to hit submit on those applications. Otherwise, what's going to happen is they are going to go ahead and count your parental income during the entire month of your child's birthday when they turned 18. So don't be thinking, oh, I'm going to get ahead of the game, be so organized. You're going to get denied immediately and have to redo everything, because they're going to count your income for that month. Unfortunately, that is the way that works. Oh, I know. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Medicaid applications I learned today from somebody who works in the state. We had called him because he was known to be like the guru of what is called the Lopez waiver in Missouri. And if anybody knows what that is, it's pretty much equivalent to the TA waiver in Kansas. And essentially what it means is that your child with high medical needs can get a Medicaid waiver and we won't count the parent income. And the problem is that it's very hard to get the Lopez waiver in Missouri because there's only 366 slots and they're always full and there's always a wait list of hundreds, maybe even thousands of people waiting to get on that waiver. So we called my friend Matt in Jeff City and said, hey, you know, we don't really know, can't find another route for this family to get a waiver for their 8-9-year-old daughter, actually, excuse me, 8-9-year-old granddaughter. And we can't find another way to get her a waiver, but she's got a lot of expenses. And he said, well, he studied the situation more carefully. He said, you don't need the Lopez waiver. I'm like, what are you talking about? This family makes really good money. They're, you know, they can't qualify for the other waivers. And he said, well, you don't need to worry about that because they're only her guardians. They're not adopting her, even though they're her, you know, she's their granddaughter. And of course they love her more than anything, but they deliberately made a decision not to do adoption in part because they wanted to make her more eligible for benefits and services as she's going to need them. She uses a wheelchair full time and she has an autism diagnosis. So she's got a lot going on. So they said, Matt said, well, she can qualify because she's considered her own individual household because of the fact that she's not being adopted by her grandparents. And I mean, I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I missed that. So we're going for regular old Medicaid for her, and then we're going to ask for a regular old waiver, which there are far, far, far more slots available on the community support waiver than any other waiver in the state. So, yeah, amazing. I'm super excited to see how this goes. And he also has a streamlined process in his office they have developed for Medicaid applications because somebody who works for him used to work in the Medicaid application department in Missouri. So she has helped him design this system that is super fast. And I get to be a fly on the wall and walk through the whole thing and see how they do it. And I should be able to replicate everything they're going to do. There's no like secret potion there, no secret buttons. So it's all in how you do it and who you know and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, because right now, honestly, guys, Medicaid and Social Security is a disaster. Both offices are just completely out of control and they are so backlogged from the pandemic and everything. They've never caught up on employees. They have never caught up on paperwork. They, you know, even this liaison office that I'm talking about in Jeff City, they have 150 high priority cases that they are chasing themselves. And this is aside from the entire rest of the state of Missouri. This is just for people who qualify for developmental disability services and happen to have figured out who this little weird office is. So it's pretty weird right now. There's a lot going on. And if we want to, you know, have a better experience, we need to understand better what these problems are and frankly, take them to our legislators this spring, which is something I'm planning to do for sure. If anybody wants to join me, come on, we'll go for a little car ride. Okay. So other applications you can fill out, county boards, regional offices and county boards of services. And in Kansas, you guys have CDDOs, which is county developmental disability organizations. There's so many applications and things, you know, that you can request along the ways. And of course you can request waivers. You typically get case management. In Missouri, we have Autism Project, which is kind of a mess, but it's one stream of funding that has nothing to do with Medicaid, and it's actually about to change. And then your Senate Bill 40s, which is the same thing as your County Board of Services. In Missouri, anyhow, we have mini grants available through the county boards of services. I don't know for sure if the CDDOs give away mini grants or not, but there are things like, hey, my electricity is about to get turned off and I don't have any way to pay for it, or my kiddo really wants to go to camp and I can't find any other way to do the down payment because they don't qualify for anything. Stuff like that. It's important for people to understand what the obligations are at this level, though. So regional office is your regional location. Now, again, Kansas doesn't have regional offices, by the way, which is weird. So in Kansas, by the way, your CDDOs, your county developmental disability organizations, almost function as county boards and regional office at the same time. And Julie, I see your hand. Let me finish the sentence. The next, though, so regional offices are where the money decisions are made. They're the ones that say yay or nay to when you ask for funding. And then your county board of services is really supposed to provide targeted case management. So they're supposed to check on you, get to know you, write up plans for what you're asking for, and write them in such a way that they will likely be accepted by the regional office and ultimately funded. That is their job. And they're not to serve as gatekeepers, although I will tell you in Missouri, because of the way targeted case management has changed from being done at regional office to being done in counties, we are getting a lot of confusion of roles and we're getting a lot of gatekeeping that should not be happening. Yeah, Julie, what were you going to ask?
Okay, unmuting shouldn't have been that difficult. That was on me. I'm just clicking whatever. When it comes to SB 40s, and my family situation, I have an adult son who he was diagnosed with epilepsy at age 10, and it definitely affected him, and that's documented. As an adult now, he's 28. He's had other diagnoses compounded on top of that, comorbidities that it's changed his world. Would he still qualify to go back to an SB 40 at age 28 as an adult?
Possibly. So a lot of it will depend on the different diagnoses and symptoms and when they were identified by medical professionals as well as regional office in the county. But say you have some medical evidence that you never shared with the county or with regional office, but it happened before the age of 22, then the answer is yes, you just take all that information with you.
Okay, yeah, because we have documentation that goes back to age 10 for his epilepsy. Everything else has kind of come out. Well, he had asthma too, so a couple things, but I don't know. Like you said, you have to prove it was significant disabling for eligibility for SSI, but does it have to be that significantly to your SB 40 support? So okay, thank you.
Yeah, it does. Well, and if he qualified before, chances are he'll qualify now.
Well, we had never taken him in because at this point we just my daughter being amazingly disabled, much more disabled. He didn't seem so disabled comparatively. It just grew on him. Right. So yeah, it's a phone call. I can make it. I just always been in the back of my mind. Yeah.
If you've got the evidence from before 22 and you can show how it's impacting his life, I think you have a very good chance of getting their attention. And if they say no, then they need to articulate why. And number two, if they do say no, there's a chance that he could utilize the DHSS system, which is Department of Health and Social Services or Senior Services. It really should be Senior and Social Services. Anyhow, they have Medicaid waivers over there for slightly different reasons. If a waiver is what he needs, I don't even know if that's what you guys want to accomplish.
Yeah, at this stage, no, but I always like to look at the worst case scenario and plan for that. I also know the Georgia Mueller system, which is, I know who to call, but that's good information. Thank you.
But do plan. Yeah, I agree with that though, for sure. Like planning for not necessarily planning for the worst case scenario, but being aware of what the options would be. How far can I stretch this option if I need to?
And just let him know. My thought is and that's kind of what I'm thinking is if something happens to me where I'm not available to advocate for him, who's your backup advocate? That's a big thing that I'm wanting as much as
Yeah.
anything. So yeah.
Absolutely. You're welcome. Yeah. But that's a good question, though. A lot of people, I do meet a lot of clients who have never taken advantage of any kind of formal systems for whatever reason. Maybe they just, like you said, my daughter had so many more needs, it didn't even occur to us. And then I also definitely meet the bootstrapper families who are like, I have it figured out. We got it covered. And then they go, oh, crap, we don't. And it's, they're very surprised by themselves, actually. And they do decide at some point that they want to seek help, or everything's going along fine. And then suddenly life falls apart at 27, and they go, we didn't see this coming. But if they have the evidence that occurred before the age of 22, they can still go in. I've got a young lady I helped a year ago, and she was able to actually become a firm client, which she had been a vague client before that, like they knew her, but she never got any services. She became a firm client, and she accessed a Medicaid waiver at the age of 38. And she didn't even have a she didn't even have a medical diagnosis for her autism that occurred in her early 30s. However, everything else that had happened in her life showed up in different places along the way that the evidence was present. And the intake department did a really great job of asking the right questions and looking for that evidence to see how it all tied to answer, together to answer that question. They didn't just blow her off and say, sorry, we don't see it, go away. They dug deeper. I was super impressed. They could have walked away from her, but they
assuming it's true. The good news is, besides they have some documents, but Children's Mercy, when I called once in a panic about something else, they've told me, because a lot of places get rid of their records after so many years, and I was trying to drag down my daughters, and they said because of knowing the future isn't always, easy to see. They told me that they do not get rid of records. Like,
wow.
Yeah. Now, again, that's what they told me at the time, and it was kind of shocking to me. But it's not always easy to get. But they said they do not get rid of the records because they know that. Did I get them? No, because I trust that they're there. But so at least for Children's Mercy Hospital, and ideally, then if that's the case for other children's hospitals, they will hold on to things.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Well, those are where those critical decisions are made is the youth ages.
Right.
So it's important. I'm glad to hear that. Okay, so other kind of entities and applications and stuff like that, you of course have all your insurance applications, your public and your private, and then combinations. Speaking of combinations, you definitely, a lot of times people feel like, oh, I can't apply for Medicaid because I have private insurance. And that's, of course, an issue when your person is a child, but a lot of times, regardless of whether you have private insurance or not, you can still qualify for Medicaid. And the beauty is you combine the two together. So you put public and private together, they cancel out each other's copays. And then on top of that, if you have a version of Medicaid that's the right version, which they've narrowed it a little bit recently, but if you have the right version of Medicaid and they like your private health insurance policy and believe that the benefits under that are going to be beneficial to the state's financial bottom line, then they will actually pay you for the premiums to keep your child on that private policy, which is amazing. So you get paid all your premiums back. Now, in Missouri, they pay you for the premiums for everybody that's on that policy. In Kansas, they only pay you the premiums of the child that has the Medicaid as well. And states can do that any way they want. It's their choice. Medicaid is truly a state program. It operates with federal funding for sure, but it's truly a state run program for sure. Let's hear. So that's what's so great about Medicaid. The other thing that's great about Medicaid is they're paying for all those peripheral things, like when your kiddo's young and they're not potty trained yet, or you need therapeutic equipment, you need a new wheelchair that costs as much as a car. These are things you can't get from your private insurance, even if you wanted to. And
Georgia, I'm sorry, I'm just interrupting. Does that include like Medicare also? If you're one of those few that happens Medicare, they will not cover your Medicare premiums.
Oh, no, that's not true. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's what I'm asking.
I
Yeah.
didn't understand. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes and no. So what happens is that Medicare and the whole system works together to offer to cover your premiums if your income is low enough. So then you end up with Medicare, Medicaid, private if you want to keep it. Yeah, and
Yeah, we didn't have this good information because she's been on my husband's private forever, but she's, yeah, we're hoping to get her in Medicare because she has been working. And I did not realize, and I think I maybe knew and forgot, but this is good because I will ask then about whether it would cover her Medicare premiums when she has both. That's huge.
Yeah, we should talk about the whole transition between with getting Medicare and the transition to SSDI from SSI because there's some potential pitfalls there.
Okay.
So hold on a sec, and you and I.
I'm not doing anything tomorrow. Later. That's okay.
Don't do it tomorrow. Don't do it tomorrow. Just wait a few minutes. Yep. Okay. So with Medicaid, the other cool thing is if you go looking for a certain kind of specialist, say you want a speech pathologist, well, there might be 200 some odd within your county and under Medicaid, and your private insurance or your managed care Medicaid might have only had 5. That's not helpful for, so to have the full Medicaid, your pool just gets way bigger every time you go to look for a service and look for help. Grants, we go on and on about grants. We really don't have time. I saw what time it is right now. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, hold on. I'm going to skip the grant section tonight. That could be a whole nother deal. The main thing though on filling out applications in general is always be very thorough about answering the actual questions they're asking. Please don't answer something else. Don't elaborate like way beyond the answer. Because think about it this way. If you work for a charity, for example, and you've been charged with reading all the incoming applications and you have 100 to get through in the next month, if you've got people that are adding on tons of information beyond what you asked for, you're going to get a little tired and you may be less likely to fund someone who has gone on and on about stuff that you didn't actually need the answer to. So keep it narrow, keep it close to the original question if you can. I mean, if you have to elaborate, you do, but keep it as close as you can. Read the applications in advance whenever is possible, and sometimes even read them backwards. Because what happens a lot of times is you answer that first question, you're like, oh, they're not asking it in enough detail. I'm going to have to put all the detail right here. And what you don't realize is the high detail question is near the end of the application, but you haven't seen it yet. So try to read those applications backwards before you fill them out, so you don't top load, you don't make them top heavy or whatever. Have your financial data downloaded and available to quickly respond to these things. So keep your financial information organized. Like the kinds of questions they frequently ask are things like, how much extra out of pocket are you needing to spend on your child's therapy each year or your child's whatever? Keep that information all together in one place and keep it organized if you can. Even if it just means one shoebox, it's still better than 20 different places in your house. So try to keep that stuff organized. You could even use like a financial organizer, like an online app for bank accounts. You could organize maybe information sort of into deductions you could use for filing your taxes, for example, which, by the way, I hear there's a chance we might end up having deductions again, and they may get rid of standardized deductions in the next couple of years. We'll see what happens. And I'm sorry, I have a gnat issue. I don't know where this guy comes from. Can't get rid of the gnat. Anyhow, financial, let's see, put opportunities on your calendar. So a lot of these applications and charities in particular, they don't come open but once a year or once every 3 months or something like that. Put them on your calendar in advance so you can plan for them, because we get busy and we forget this stuff. And sure as heck, you're going to remember the application, when it was due last week. That's not going to help you. Be sure to understand the criteria and the eligibility to apply. So time use. What did I mean by that? I'm not sure what I meant by that. Age of child, diagnosis, income guidelines. Oh, sometimes they'll say, like you can't bill for, or you can't apply for a grant for anything that you've already paid for. It has to be something going forward, which is really irritating, but they frequently do it that way. Make sure you understand the guidelines for income. So are they asking for your gross income or your net income? You know, before taxes or after taxes? Are they asking for your total out of pocket to include your premiums and copays and deductibles? Or do they just want to know about beyond the copays and deductibles and premiums? So really read these things thoroughly. And if you're not sure, have somebody else take a look at it for you and see if they understand it the same way that you're perceiving it as well. Because it's kind of, it's kind of lousy to spend a lot of time writing an application and then find out you answered it incorrectly. It's really exhausting. So creative funding ideas. I just kind of got a little nutty one day and just sort of started making a big list. Sell something, sell anything. I saw a friend of mine from a church I used to go to. She's selling miniature apple pies at the fair. I'm like, how easy is that? And it's relatively cheap, use able accounts, but make sure you know what they, how to use them, what they're for and what they're not for, in combination with a special needs trust. And if your kiddo is potentially going to go to further education and even college, you can use a 529 account. And if they start college and then they decide it's not for them, they can roll a 529 back into an able or into a special needs trust, and you haven't lost anything. And none of those things will be counted against them in eligibility for benefits. So, Julie, you asked about SNAP earlier, I think. SNAP resides, just so you know, it resides in the state box. So, and as soon as somebody is over 22 and they fit the financial guidelines, you can apply them for SNAP. Currently, the the SNAP payments, as long as they're also paying you fair rate, room and board, the SNAP payments we're getting right now for Caleb are a little over 200. They're like 209, but I think he's supposed to be getting closer to 300, and I'm not sure why he's not. And there could be something else I need to do to make that happen. So, but between 200 and 300 currently per month, which is a lot, So,
Hey, Georgia, we got a comment in the
wow.
Here. I just want to cover and make sure you hit. Rahel just shared. My understanding is that if you make Medicare your primary, then your private will be secondary, and Medicare isn't good coverage. Is that correct?
Actually, it's backwards. So that's a great question, though. So, if you make Medicare, Medicare or Medicaid, rail, which one are you talking about?
You said Medicare. If you make Medicare your primary, then your private will be secondary.
Yeah, but nobody's getting access to Medicare until their child is at least an adult. Minor age kids do not.
I'm referring to over 18 and up.
Over 18, and they also have SSDI?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So whoever they're deriving SSDI from has to have been on their own Medicare for two years before they can get their Medicare, first of all. If you have Medicare and private, all right, let me rank these for you, okay? So there's Medicare, there's Medicaid, there's private. Private insurance is always your payer of first resort, always. The closest you can get to a private resource of any kind will always be the first payer. So it would be private insurance first, Medicare would be second, and Medicaid would be last. And Medicaid, good, bad, or indifferent, it gets a bad rap because it's government stuff, but and Medicare is too. I wouldn't say it's better or worse. I would say the challenge with Medicare in particular that I have learned from many people whose kids have it or adult kids have it is that Medicare becomes a barrier because they can say no to things that Medicaid or your private would have said yes to. And then your private or Medicaid has to follow what Medicare said because they're the main decision makers. So it's not so much about being good or bad, it's just about how the different rules are laid out. So how these different policies interface with each other. I hope that makes sense. It's confusing. Trust me. Yeah, but you should keep asking questions about stuff like that constantly for more than just myself, for sure. I mean, always. The more questions you ask, the more people you talk to, the better, more fleshed out answers you're going to get because this stuff is confusing and there are a lot of details. So I don't know. Did that help? It did. Okay, I see them.
There we got them.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
All right. Well, I want to respect everybody's time. This is always something we could talk quite a while on. Georgia, I want to thank you for taking time and sharing tonight. Great information. If you'd share that with me, I'll put it with this and we'll get this video put together and up on the website. We're going to be launching a new website within the next couple of weeks, so it'll be easier to find. Other thing, our next Caregivers 411 for November, we are going to be talking on special needs trusts. Ryan Foley will be our speaker for that. He just opened his own law firm to do special needs trusts. He's phenomenal and he'll be great. So that'll be a good one. I know, Julie, you were just talking about wanting to go back and look at special needs trusts. That's something that is good to look at again after so many years. So that'll be a great topic and he'll be sharing a lot with that. And I think he'll also be talking on as well some guardianship, conservatorship, and what we need to know with that. So that'll be again the 4th Tuesday in November with that. But again, Georgia, thank you so much. I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and we'll see you all next month. So have a blessed week. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.